Thanks. And now I would like to invite Mark Rosiers from Belgium. And how I understand that he is an advisor in food and agri company. And welcome.
Thank you. I will share my presentation. You see it already?
Not yet. Will be.
It's there now?
Yes, Mark, it's working.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much, Thomas, for inviting me at this scientific workshop on sea buckthorn agronomy. Myself, I'm an economist, and like was all said in the introduction, I have a career of about 25 years in agro-food sector, more the general sector, of course. I've been active in agro-supply, farming, processing, and I'm also working for retail. And my interest in the sea buckthorn sector is quite recent and is the result of accompanying the successful submission of Biocatina for an agri project promoting organic sea buckthorn in third countries, more specifically in Singapore, South Korea, and Switzerland. And within this project, the study of the potential of the creation for a sea buckthorn interbranch organization is an integral part. And Thomas asked me to share with you what are the basic concept of this type of European instrument. And I will now quickly go to my presentation so that you get a flavor of the potential of the different instruments that are offered by the European Commission. My presentation will have two components. First component is organizing the farmers, what I call horizontal organization. Stanislav Pluta already said there are no grower associations in Poland. I think in some other countries, Biocatina is an example. In Romania, there are a growers association. The first thing to get a supply chain organized is first of all organizing farmers. I will speak, I have some slides on that. And then secondly, once you have organized farmers, then you have to organize the supply chain. And also there, the European Commission is providing some instruments, and that's called the interbranch organization, which regroups all the different stages of the chain, starting from genetics, harvesting machines, all types of supply, then the organized production, individual or organized production, then you got the processing, at the end also the traders, and finally you got even, in some circumstances, you got even the retail on board. So those are the two parts of my presentation. First of all, why we included in the Biocatina Agri project this idea of an interbranch organization, because if you study and look a little bit at the sea buckthorn sector, you see that on the one hand, we have, in fact, I call it a superfood. It's a segment of the larger berry market with very specific needs, specific preferences, and so on. On the other hand, you see that supply is characterized by a very large number of, and quite a lot of times, non-organized smallholder farmers, although there are also big farmers, of course, but they're all quite motivated and convinced of the value of their product. And when you look at processing capacity, even there, when I compare it to other big crop sectors like potatoes or cereals or beet sugar beet sector and so on, it's quite a limited number even of processors in a few member states. Not every member state has even a processor. And at the end, when you look at demand side, you see consumers that are ready to pay more than average for healthy, tasty, and nutritious food. So we have what I call, this is really a niche market. And like Stanislas also said, there's sea buckthorn is still a very poor integrated product in the daily diets, despite all these nutritional capacities and so on. So there is still some room to get and to structure more promotion. And therefore, continued effort in education and information is necessary. And that was the idea I put on the table with the people of Biocatina. I said, okay, in the common organization of markets in at the European Common Agricultural Policy, there are different instruments that are available to organize, on one hand, farming, and to organize also the different supply chains. And this whole set of instruments was already applicable in the previous Common Agricultural Policy, which came to the end by the end of 2020, and is now renewed again until 2027 without any exception. It's completely rollover. There was a complete rollover. And it foresees two types of instruments. First of all, the organization of farmers in producer organizations or unions of producers organizations. And secondly, the organization of the chain, of the food supply chain, the CBOC chain, in interbranch organization. And like I said, we integrated this in the submission that was very successful, and this is now an integral part of this project. And like it's the title here of this slide, it's all about cooperation. And there are two types of cooperation. You got horizontal, I mentioned it already. It's an organization which structure the cooperation between farmers. And vertically, it's the organization which structured, in fact, the whole chain, starting from supply over production, processing until the retail. That's, in fact, in a nutshell, what's all about. So first aspect is the producer organization. The basic principle there is a producer organization. It's called PO. It's in fact for and by the farmer. It's in the European Commission said, okay, on the initiative of a farmer, of farmers, they can constitute and regroup themselves in a producer organization, which can take different legal forms. The standard legal form, which is also favored by the European Commission, is the legal form of a cooperative. But I've also seen other producer organizations with other legal forms. It depends on what you really want to organize. They are economic actors. So they plan their production. They organize the selling of their product. They even, in certain instances, organize the purchase of inputs. So they are really a company that is active in all the different domains a company is active in, buying materials and goods, transforming them in a product, selling them, and have all the administrative follow-up. They are also allowed, of course, to develop, to set prices, to define volumes, and so on. And what's important, recognize the producer organization within the Common Agricultural Policy is exempted from the competition rules. So that means that a producer organization can discuss internally on prices and on volumes without having to fear that there is a problem with European competition law. This is a quite important feature of a producer organization. The classical benefits are access to economies of scale. What you can't do alone, you can do in group better. Saving transaction costs. That means instead of that every farming is negotiating with his supplier or with his client, it's the cooperative who is going to negotiate. So you earn and you earn transaction costs, you lower transaction costs. You can build up some market power, of course, that's the side effect. You can also benchmark within the cooperative. Each individual farmer can benchmark its own performance with respect to his colleagues. And the cooperative can benchmark with respect to other cooperatives. And last but not least, there is financial support. So when you start a cooperative, the Common Agriculture Policy foresees budgetary lines to accompany the startup of companies and by that to help and to foster the growth of those type of structures. That's quite an important feature. When you see that the regulatory reform framework, like I said, the initiative has to be taken by farmers. They have to execute at least one joint activity, for instance, let's say buying some inputs or asking common advice to produce Seebuckthorn or something else. One joint activity has to be put in place. And then there is a whole list, it's about 15 of potential objectives, which are listed in the regulation of the European Commission, which can be achieved through a producer organization. And I gave one example because that's quite often one of the first steps or first objective that is realized is in fact programming production and its adaptation to demand, particularly in terms of quality and quantity, because it's important for the downstream partners of the chain, of course. Also develop initiatives in the field of promotion and marketing. The Agri project of Biocotina is one of the examples of that. APO does not necessarily has to start engaging, recruiting persons and people from the start. They can do this also by engaging third parties. We had already some experts already in this workshop. So in fact, the PO can decide to collaborate to realize its objective by collaborating with external parties. When I accompany the creation of PO, that's my first advice. Instead of engaging recruiting from day one personnel, you can do better by agreeing on a consultancy mission, which can be limited in time. You know before what will be the budget, so everything is more certain and more in line with the step-by-step approach. And like I said already, once a PO is approved, and every member state has normally a formal procedure for approval of POs, you get access to subsidies. This whole evolution of organizing farming is quite well looked upon by retail. Like I said, I'm working also today for a number of retailers, and they are quite interesting to see this type of organized farming, because when they have some specific questions or specific wishes, in fact, instead of communicating this to many individual farmers, when they only they can communicate it to the organized farming, and it's more efficient, more efficient by communicating in that way. And it's they are assured that in fact when they are communicating, also the message goes down towards the individual farming. So this is also very well looked upon by downstream partners in the chain. Secondly, once we have organized farming, and this is not an obligation, but okay, it's a good step forward, we can start organizing the chain. And like I said, a producer organization is an economic entity. An interbranch organization is everything except an economic entity. An interbranch organization, like I put in the title, it runs the chain, but it's not an economic actor. It's more a platform where the different interests of the different partners of the chain are put together, put on the table in order to get a common vision, and by getting a common vision, to realize a common objective, and that is, of course, fostering and making the complete seed buckthorn chain more performant, better structured, and at the end with a higher profitability. It's in fact the platform that makes the rules for everybody, and by making the rules, you can get a better result at the end. And I will explain this in more detail. So you see here the exact article in the regulation, which makes the creation of interbranch organization possible. And the European Commission already made a study during the previous Common Agricultural Policy period in 2016, where they analyzed the different IBOs that were already created during the last Common Agricultural Policy. And when you see what are the main objectives of those IBOs, they are, first of all, transparency. I come back later what that can be. Research topics. We had already some examples today. improving product quality, strengthening the competitiveness and innovation of the sector. We also saw some examples today, and promoting consumption. And when you translate this in more practical suggestions, which can be thought of, which can be integrated in an interbranch organization, like I said, transparency is the first element. We should perhaps, there are a lot of statistical data. When I first was asked by Beer Cortina to help them, I had to find my way to find statistics. It's not evident to find statistics. There are indicators, but okay, we can perhaps develop them more in more detail. We can develop indicators on prices, on price trends, on production cost, trends. It is not an exhaustive list, just by way of example. We can try to organize it in a way that people are not feared to send over their data. So we can organize a sort of black box at the level of the IBO, where all those data can be gathered with respect for privacy, confidentiality, and all those very important qualities, in order to get some aggregated data, so that we can, which is in fact the basis of any lobby or public affairs campaign later on. You need to have data on your sector, and that will, on the basis of this data, we can then organize an interesting and efficient promotion of our interest. Another element is, for instance, we can develop some better marketing conditions. We can discuss on harvest periods, of fruit specifications, on genetics and all those type of things. We can also optimize good agriculture and environmental and climatological practices, the so-called GAICs, which are also present in the Common Agriculture Policy. And recently also with the Green Deal and with the Farm to Fork strategy and the strategy on biodiversity, and not at least the Fit for 55% climate strategy of the European Commission, I think there is an interesting role for sea buckthorn as a crop that can help restoring healthy soils. The European Commission is preparing a soil health law, which will force the agricultural system to change practices in order to sustain and to restore healthy soils. We can also do some organize and structure within the interbranch organization research. The interesting research results we saw today, they can also be part of this type of interbranch organization. And we saw today studies on plant diseases, but we can also think about plant genetics. We can do some pre-competitive market research because we do not have to take the place of the processors or the traders. It's their job to do the marketing. But of course, they can be helped by doing some pre-competitive market research and to show where we can have some additional efforts in order to sustain their own efforts in selling the sea buckthorn products. Of course, export promotion, the Agri program is a very good example of that. And at the end, of course, when you can show to the public authorities that you are working together as a complete supply chain, you get, of course, more power towards politicians, to opinion leaders, to opinion makers. And by that also you get some better understanding from those people, and perhaps also some better support. Those are just by way of example, things that can be developed within the IBO. I said already, once you are sufficient representative for your sector, you can ask for extension of rules. That means that if you decide as a platform, as an IBO, that, for instance, you want to set up a study to improve the different practices, agricultural practices to produce sea buckthorn in order to improve quality, when you are representative for your sector, you can ask the competent authorities to extend this rule to everybody active in the sector. It's quite an important instrument because it eliminates the free riders, and it enforces that, in fact, once you decide on some quality rules or some other rules that you agree upon within the CBUG term inter-branch organization, they are applicable on all the players in the sector, which is of course a very important instrument. It's even possible that the competent authority accepts also that there is an extension of compulsory contribution. For instance, it happened quite often in the past in other sectors that, for instance, some fundamental research was financed by a euro per hectare process. And in that respect, farmers, but also other processes contribute to finance the research. Once you got an extension of rules, the same competent authority can define that also the contribution becomes compulsory for all the partners within the chain. So this is those are two quite important instruments which are linked to first of all the representativity of the chain partners which are grouped in the interbranch organization, and secondly, of course, also based on the exact proposal that we do to, or that you do to the competent authorities. Normally, it are the member states who have to recognize interbranch organizations, like it are the member states who have to recognize the producers organizations, but the European regulation foresees also the existence or the creation of transnational POs and IBOs. And that means that once you have an IBO or a producer organization acknowledged and recognized within a member state, it can also become operative in surrounding neighboring countries, and in that way, it can become also a transnational IBO or a transnational PO. This is a specific procedure that has to be followed at European Commission level because it involves, for instance, I take the example, you make an IBO between Germany and Belgium, for instance. It involves, of course, the competent authorities of Germany and Belgium. And to moderate that, there is only one moderating party that can come into play. That's, of course, the Commission level. So this is an additional layer that we can add on this whole idea of producer and IBO organizations. I'm almost ready. Last slide. The legal structure, like I said, for an IBO, it's not a cooperative. An IBO is normally a non-profit organization because it's not the objective to make profit, but to make rules. Who are the members? By preference, all the supply chain partners within the chain. You can have also associated members, and the people here around this workshop are typically the associated members you have around this table, scientific institutes, civil servants, opinion leaders, and makers. And the finance is done normally in 3 ways. Of course, there is a member contribution, service fees. When you render services to your members, you can ask for fees, but also public funds for research and subsidies from the European Commission within the Common Agriculture Policy. But I must say, with respect to producers organization, the subsidy lines are not that huge for IBOs. They are more developed for producer organizations. And by that, I gave you a flavor of how the sector can be organized in the 2 ways, horizontally or vertically. And I'm open for questions if there are questions from the audience. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mark, for your practical presentations and yes, information about this cooperatives and cooperation organizations is very important. Okay, we have 5 minutes for questions. Yes, I see that Hamid would like to ask something. Hamid?
Professor, thank you for your presentation. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
would you please tell me how much does it cost for 1 kilogram dried fruits or fresh fruits in your country, Belgium? And the second question is how you support some researchers, because you presented that you will prepare some fund for research.
First of all, like I said, my first experience with the Seabuckton sector was when I was a company, Biocatina, in developing their submission. I'm not aware about the exact price level of those products in Belgium. I only know that they are sold in special specialized food channels, not in the ordinary retail. I do not see that in ordinary retail. And I did not say that we have funds available within the IBO for research. I only said that in an IBO, when you come with a research plan as a complete chain, research project with a complete chain as supporters of this research project, it's easier to get finance secured than when you come as a separate or individual organization. So a way to finance IBO is also, of course, to develop together some scientific projects. And by developing together scientific project and submitting them to the competent within the competent programs, you can you secure yourself also for funding for this IBO activity. That's what I said.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thomas, you have a question?
More a comment than a question, yes, because I think also Stanislav mentioned how important actually is the situation to find stable ways of marketing of Seabuckthorn. And I think mostly in all countries of European community, producers are small compared to other agricultural production facilities, companies, and so on. And small farms every time feel great pressure from around, and they need some organization going over borders to support development of Seabuckthorn. And I think from my point of view, and I think at the end of this week on Friday, we here in Berlin have a meeting of the German Society. We need to find the next step to find international organization structures that are supporting Seabuckthorn growing, selling, production. So this means one inter-business organization. If it is necessary to have producers organization inside one country, it's the second question and depend on the structure. If I understand, for instance, Stanislav, I can imagine that for Poland may be interesting to have. Yes, only from my point of view, it's very important to have a next step in this Seabuckthorn business coming to the next level. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas.